There's a kind of woman who doesn't just love, she awakens. She doesn't offer surface connection. She invites transformation. And for a man still hiding from himself, that is terrifying. He says she's too intense, too emotional, too much, but what he really means is, she sees him. And that kind of gaze, the kind that penetrates masks and armor, is more than most men know how to receive. So he pulls away. Not because she's wrong, but because he's not ready. This is not about blame. This is about the way light burns when it touches what's still buried. It's about the grief of being a mirror for someone who still refuses to look. It's about the deep heartbreak of women who keep wondering, was I too much? Or was he just not enough? Let's explore 10 reasons he couldn't love a woman like you, not because you weren't lovable, but because your love came with truth *1. You reflected his insecurity instead of hiding it. You didn't flatter his ego. You saw through it. While others admired his charm, you noticed the cracks. You heard the silence behind his loudness. You felt the fear in his distance. You didn't chase him when he pulled away. You asked why he was running at all. And that made you dangerous. You were the mirror he wasn't ready to look into. Because loving you didn't let him hide. Your presence demanded honesty. Not with you, with himself. And that's a kind of intimacy most people mistake for confrontation. You didn't expose him out of cruelty. You simply wouldn't play along with his self-denial. And he didn't know how to stay. With someone who didn't buy the mask, he spent his whole life creating that, so he retreated. Not because you were too much, but because he was too fragile. And somewhere deep down, you knew this man didn't reject you. He rejected the truth you carried in your eyes too. You didn't need him to complete you, and that scared him. There's a quiet power in a woman who is whole. Not perfect, not invulnerable, but rooted, sovereign. You didn't ask him to rescue you. You didn't beg for attention. You didn't dissolve into his identity just to be loved. And for a man who built his worth on being needed, not met, that was terrifying. He couldn't play the hero because you weren't playing the helpless girl. You had your own light, your own rhythm, your own world. And instead of orbiting his gravity, you held your own sky. That kind of presence doesn't cling. It doesn't beg. It invites. And that invitation demands maturity, the kind he hadn't yet earned. He didn't know how to be with a woman who didn't need saving. He only knew how to feel valuable through someone else's wounds. So when you stood in your fullness, not waiting, not begging, not shrinking, he felt irrelevant. Not because you diminished him, but because he hadn't yet discovered who he was outside of being chased free. You made him feel things he wasn't ready to feel. Most men are not afraid of love. They're afraid of what love awakens. You didn't just make him feel affection. You made him feel grief, longing, tenderness, shame, the ache of what he never received as a child, the terror of losing something real, the weight of being truly seen and truly capable of hurting someone who matters. And that is no small thing. You are not a distraction. You were a mirror. You opened doors inside him that he had sealed, shut long ago. And while a part of him was magnetized by that, another part panicked. Because emotional depth requires stillness, presence, accountability. It brings everything to the surface. And not every man is ready to hold what rises. So he shut down. Not because you asked too much, but because you touched too much. And when a man isn't emotionally developed enough to hold what your love activates, he won't stay. Not because he doesn't care, but because caring would require a self he hasn't yet become for. You were too honest. For the games he was still playing, he wasn't used to truth. He was used to performance, manipulation, chasing and withdrawing. He had learned how to survive, Love, not how to receive it. So when you brought honesty to the table, raw, direct, vulnerable, he didn't know how to meet it. Because honesty destroys the games that ego depends on. You didn't withhold to gain power. You didn't pretend not to care. You didn't perform softness to seduce. You embodied it. You didn't flirt with silence to be mysterious. You spoke your needs. And for a man who still saw relationships as power struggles, your transparency was confusing, even threatening. He didn't know how to respond to a woman who wasn't trying to win, who didn't play hot and cold, who didn't weaponize her, silence or beg for breadcrumbs. You came as you are, whole, feeling, sincere. And he realized he couldn't control someone who wasn't trying to be controlled. So he pulled back, not because your honesty was wrong, but because it required him to show up without armor. And he wasn't ready to love without it. 5. You loved him in a way that asked him to grow. You didn't love him because of who he pretended to be. You loved the parts of him he had long abandoned. The softness behind the sarcasm, the boy beneath the bravado, the tenderness behind the detachment. And that kind of love isn't passive. It's a summons. It doesn't just comfort, it confronts. And that confrontation quietly asks, are you ready to become the man who can hold this? But he wasn't. Not then. He was still committed to the version of himself that was safe, untouched, unchallenged. He wanted to be loved. For his mask, not his potential. He wasn't ready to be asked for more, even gently, because he knew that to meet you in love, he would have to meet himself in truth. And that journey terrified him. So he ran, not from your love, but from what your love demanded. Not control, not perfection, but growth. And a man who's not ready to grow will always make a woman feel like she's asking too much, when she's only asking for what's real. 6. You were doing all the emotional work. You noticed the distance, so you leaned in. You felt the tension, so you softened. You sensed his wounds, so you held space. Again and again and again, until the relationship was no longer mutual. It became a quiet performance of your endurance. He didn't have to reach for you, because you were always reaching first. He didn't have to ask how you were feeling, because you were too busy managing his. You didn't complain, but you were tired. Tired of decoding his moods. Tired of holding all the silence. Tired of loving for both of you, just to keep the connection alive. And while he may have appreciated your care, he never matched it, because he didn't have to. Because you filled every gap with your effort. And slowly, that effort became invisible, expected, unreciprocated. Love is not sustained by one heart doing the work of two. Eventually, even the most tender woman burns out, not from anger, but from emptiness. And he couldn't love you, because he was never willing to meet you. 7. He valued what you gave, but not who you were. He liked your presence, your kindness, your steady love. He praised how much you gave, but he never paused to ask, who are you beneath all this giving? Because for him, your value was in your utility, not your identity. You became the peacekeeper, the nurturer, the emotional healer. And somewhere along the way, you stopped being a woman with a soul and became a function in his life. He didn't do this to hurt you. He did it because he never learned how to love beyond what he could receive. And you made it easy. Too easy. You always showed up, always forgave, always stayed. He consumed your softness, but never honored the heart it came from. And so you vanished in plain sight, still there, still giving, but unseen, unfelt, until the ache became unbearable, not because he stopped loving you, but because he never really saw you ate. He wanted access to you, but not responsibility for you. He loved that you were there, that he could call and you would answer. That he could disappear and still be welcomed back. That your heart remained open even after he closed his. But love without responsibility is not love. It's convenience. And he wasn't building a future with you. He was borrowing your presence. Without earning your trust, he wanted your loyalty, your support, your body, your softness. But he didn't want to carry the weight of showing up, of making you feel safe, seen, chosen. He wanted the comfort of your love without the commitment to hold it with care. So he lingered. He said just enough to keep you there, but never enough to claim you. You were never quite his partner, never quite a priority. Always almost, and the most painful part, he didn't want to lose you, but he was never willing to truly have you either. 9. He was drawn to your feminine energy, but unwilling to rise into his masculine. He felt safe with you, drawn to your softness, your intuition, your emotional depth. You created space for connection, not just attention. And for a while, he bathed in it, in the way you listened, in the way you held, in the way you stayed open, even when he didn't know how to receive it. But instead of being inspired to rise, he grew comfortable collapsing. He didn't lead. He didn't protect. He didn't hold you in return, because he hadn't yet stepped into the part of himself that could meet your depth with structure, clarity, and presence. You were magnetic, but he was still passive. And in that imbalance, your energy began to overfunction. You became both river and shore, both flame and container, and he let you. Not out of cruelty, but out of immaturity. Your feminine deserved to be matched, not trained. But he couldn't rise, because he hadn't yet become the man your heart was calling for 10. He was only ever looking for temporary, and you were offering forever. He didn't say it outright, but you felt it. In the pauses, in the half-promises, in the way he never truly built a life that had space for you. He wasn't looking for something real. He was looking for something right now. And you, in your wholeness, in your sacred hunger for truth, were never made to be a placeholder. You offered forever, a bond, a mirror, a temple, but he wasn't ready to enter anything holy. He wanted touch without depth, love without responsibility, closeness without accountability. And when you gave him the fullness of your soul, he treated it like a moment, not a miracle, not because you were too much, but because he was still living in the mindset of temporary. He never chose you, not because you weren't enough, but because you were too real for the world. He was still hiding in. And maybe that's the heartbreak that hurts the most, being the sacred thing in someone's life. While they treat you like something they can walk away from asterisk, you were never too much. You were just too real for someone who only knew how to love in pieces. He didn't leave because you lacked something. He left because you carried everything, and he was never taught how to hold something so whole. You gave depth. He wanted simplicity. You offered truth. He craved comfort. You loved with presence. He loved with absence. And somewhere along the way, you started to believe that maybe you were the problem. That maybe if you gave less, spoke softer, needed nothing, he would stay. But you weren't sent here to shrink. You weren't made to be palatable. You weren't born to perform quietness just to earn someone's fractured affection. You are not too much. You are just enough for the kind of love that's real. And one day, not out of pain, but out of clarity, you'll look back and thank yourself for surviving the men who couldn't love you, so that you could finally become the woman who loves herself, not as compensation, but as completion. Asterisk if you're still here. It means you've loved someone who couldn't love you back, and you've questioned your worth because of it. It means you stayed longer than you should have, not out of weakness, but because your heart kept hoping. He'd finally see what was always right in front of him. But you were never invisible. You were just standing in front of someone who refused to open their eyes. Let this video be your mirror, not of your pain, but of your power, of how deeply you can love, of how much you are willing to hold, even when no one is holding you. Now it's time to give that same devotion to yourself. And if any part of this spoke to a wound you've been hiding, in silence, share it below. Tell me, which part of you was forgotten in the name of being loved? Your story might be the medicine another woman is waiting for. And if you want more of this, the truth that heals, the softness that strengthens, the sacred in your heartbreak, subscribe, not to follow a channel, but to come home to a space where your depth is never too much. Here, you are not just welcome, you are needed. There's a kind of heartbreak that doesn't scream. It doesn't shatter plates. It doesn't leave you sobbing on the floor. It just lingers. It follows you into your mornings, into your mirror, into the way you silence yourself so you won't scare the next man away. It teaches you to smile while abandoning your boundaries, to give while empty, to perform softness instead of feeling it. But love was never meant to cost you yourself. The right man won't be frightened by your truth. He won't punish your depth. He won't flinch when your eyes say more than your words. He will see it, all of it, and stay, not because you're easy, but because you're real. And in the silence after this video ends, I hope you remember, you didn't fail by loving him. You only failed when you stopped loving you. And now, it's time to come back to the woman you were before you thought you had to become someone else just to be chosen.